We're happy to have two very experienced project experts with us today. Our guest industry expert, Alan Kendall, joins us from Houston. Alan has significant experience organizing, deploying, and leading interface management activities for multi-billion-dollar oil and gas major capital projects. Chevron, Shell, and BP have each sought out his advice and invited him to lead interface management for their projects, including most recently Chevron's $11 billion Greater Longview Area project, where Alan's primary responsibilities included internal and external interface as well as risk management. We're also happy to have Kelly Maloney join us again. Kelly is our Senior Product Manager for Interface Management and brings over 20 years of experience with enterprise software applications for project and interface management. Kelly has worked with some of the largest CPCs and owner-operators to implement interface management solutions that service multi-billion-dollar projects with thousands of interfaces. Together, Alan and Kelly will discuss the owner's interface management responsibilities, and Kelly will demonstrate key Coreworx interface management features developed specifically to help owner-operators with interface management. With that, I will turn it over to Kelly.
Okay, thanks, Teresina, and thank everybody for joining us today. So today, as Teresina mentioned, we're going to talk about interface management and really focus on interface management from an owner's perspective. So just to go through our agenda here, I'm going to give a brief introduction to Coreworx, and then I'm going to hand it over to Alan Kendall, who's our guest speaker today, who's going to talk about those challenges that owners face in implementing interface management solutions and the discipline in interface management on their project. And then it'll come back to me, and we'll do a product demonstration where I'll demonstrate the concepts and the features that Alan discussed as it applies to an owner-operator. And then we'll save some time at the end of the session for some Q&A. All right, so let me get started with a little background on Coreworx. Coreworx is a software company that provides integrated information management solutions for engineering and construction projects. Our platform supports integration across the major ECM areas, including document management, workflow, and collaboration. And we focus on key areas and business practices that manage risk and promote project execution. And we do this through information sharing and by automating the business processes that connect teams and keep project stakeholders informed. Coreworx is used around the world in many different industries. And using our solutions, projects and companies improve their project execution by supplying their teams with the tools that they need to manage project information, exchange data, and collaborate to ensure project success. We have, as I mentioned, a vast array and a broad scope of different types of customers that we're working with. And again, these are located around the world, the majors in oil and gas as well as other industries. And just to highlight a couple of the owner-operators that you see here on the screen that are using our interface management solution, a few examples would be INPEX on the ITSYS project, a very large offshore project, was using the interface management application to manage their multitude of contractors and vendors and suppliers participating on that project, as well as Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco uses the interface management solution on all of their capital projects around the world, and Suncor, Husky Energy, a number of the clients and customers that you see here on this page are using our interface management solution. We also work with a number of EPCs and Tier 1 suppliers, and again, interface management as well as our other solutions and product offerings are used across the EPCs and suppliers that you see here. So now I want to give you just a little bit of background on the Coreworx product suite that we offer. We have our project information control platform, which is our base or our core platform from which we support all of the document and information management processes around document control, transmittals. We've got automated work processes around squad checks and design reviews and approvals. We also offer a change management solution, and very important during the project execution phase and into construction to be able to support the engineering changes that may be raised during the engineering phase of a project. The newest member to our product suite is our contract management module, and this module is used to manage the huge amount of work that really goes into the planning, creation, and development of a scope of work. It covers all activities related to both the pre-award and post-award phases, really giving contract administrators the ability to view all contract activities and deliverables and manage them throughout the project phase. Of course, we have interface management, which we're going to focus on today, and you'll see a demonstration of that software solution. And then deliverables management, again, another very important process and practice for any project. And this solution allows you to organize and manage documents by package and manage all those deliverables, ensuring that milestones are being met and the documents are being delivered as per your plan. This module, as with the other modules, also allows for integration with the project schedule, as a means to manage those deliverables and monitor progress. And we also have a very robust request for information or technical query process that I'm sure everybody is very familiar with. So Coreworx provides a single platform from which all project participants and the processes can be connected. And this is certainly going to improve efficiency and mitigate risk during project execution. So an integration, being able to provide an integrated product suite to your project teams is really going to enable them to be more effective and more efficiently manage the project. So integration provides the ability really to link or relate the various documents and artifacts and business processes that you see here to bring together the information and bring together the project teams. You really are looking to eliminate that kind of siloed approach where you have siloed information and siloed teams that are kind of focusing on one particular area of a project. By connecting the data and by integrating these project practices, you can provide reliable real-time visibility to all your project teams, and they have all the information that they need to make informed decisions and understand really why other decisions have been made. All right, with that introduction, and I would like to hand it over to Alan. Alan is going to now talk to us a little bit more about how interface management from an owner's perspective can help improve project execution on capital engineering and construction projects. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for the invitation to speak today, and I also thank Coreworx for hosting this event as well. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience with interface management in the owners that I've worked with. We've got the fortunate situation here in that Kelly has seen a number of owners and their implementations of interface management, and I've seen a number of different owners and their implementations as well. We'll start out with independent project analysis. So IPA, according to them, their capital solutions group, they basically put it this way succinctly: the purpose of capital project investment is to deliver maximum value to the shareholders. Choosing the right investments and executing those effectively will drive long-term competitive advantage and support innovation, business value, and profitability. So really getting all the necessary elements of these complex project systems together is extremely important. So we're talking a lot more about simple, hard interfaces between one and another system, but really organizations, processes, skills, and accountability as well. So where are we today? Well, as you all well know, the price of crude had experienced a precipitous decline towards the end of 2014, and has remained low, although it's come back up. In the last 30 days, fortunately, it's risen to around $53.50 a barrel. But really, in order to reach the 52-week high that was set in January, it would still have to rise another 7%. But keeping in mind that many projects 5 and 8 years ago or so were sanctioned with price of oil at $65 a barrel or $70 a barrel. We've experienced a pretty dramatic change in the industry. We expect some new supply data that may come out. This could keep the price of oil kind of in check from further increases. So we'll see how that data pans out. But really, general project challenges are cost overruns and schedule delays. And then in this particular environment, really successful sanction and profitable delivery of these projects depends upon very careful cost and schedule management. So what's the solution? Well, one way to compete really is to try and hone in on efficiency, cost savings as well, and one solution for that really is interface management. So owners and operators really must strive for greater oversight of interface management, and that's going to help them with authority, accountability, and efficient and profitable project delivery. One other bit of research in a PhD thesis mentioned interface management and talked about it as really all of the boundaries among project entities. So that's people, participants, project phases, resource, contracts, cost, schedule, systems, safety, etc. So it's really quite a lot of different variables that you need to manage effectively. And the bigger the project, the greater the number of interfaces that you need to manage, and the greater the project risk for asset owners and contractors. So let's think about this from a kind of a life cycle of a project perspective. This slide I really like. It talks about, it shows you kind of how complexity increases over the life cycle of a mega capital project. So when you're talking about 10, 20, $40 billion projects, you start out a little bit easier and identify or appraise. Some call this, phase one. You move into select and define, and you get more parties involved. And so now you're talking about, fabricators and engineering firms and other contractors and suppliers. But then you move into execute, and then you increase the level of complexity even further. So you see in the arrows there the number of people who need to connect with one another. It has increased, but now you see an additional layer of complexity when you start to think about who all may need to communicate with another party in the project. So for this reason, it's very important that you start early. However, we have seen cases where a project did not start early and managed to kind of pick things up and improve the delivery of the project by implementing interface management before or early in execute as well. So moving on to, we talked about IPA before. IPA has studied 14 of the largest industry projects and found that they were experiencing 46% cost overrun. And it's also estimated that interface issues are accounting for 20% of a project's overall cost. So, getting back to the point before, it's cost and schedule are really, really key in the efficiency of project delivery. So where did interface management come about? Well, it's a relatively newer term, I would say, and by relatively, I introduce here systems engineering. So the International Council on Systems Engineering, or INCOSE, defines that system engineering as an interdisciplinary approach, and it enables the realization of delivery of successful systems, but it includes customer needs, functionality early on, documenting requirements, proceeding with design synthesis, etc. And all of this is focused on operations, costs, schedule, performance, training, support, etc. So test, disposal, manufacturing. So when did this system engineering thing came about? Well, really actually Bell Laboratories is credited with first mentioning systems engineering back in the 1940s, and there were first some classes that were taught on that in 1950 at MIT. But now we're going to move on to today's era. So let's look at an offshore project today. So this offshore project that we're looking at here, this major capital project could be 10 or 20 or $30 billion project, depending upon the number of wells and production, et cetera. So for one major capital project, you've heard the tip of the iceberg, which is what you see floating above the water, but there may be 2,000 interface points involved in that major capital project. And if you multiply those times 5, you could be talking about 10,000 interface agreements and revisions of those interface agreements as well. And if you multiply that by another 10, you're looking at 100,000 task-related transactions. So the complexity, as you see, grows greater still. Let's talk about what must an owner have in implementing their interface management system. So whether this is implemented, sometimes it's implemented in a project management office for multiple projects. In other words, sometimes it's managed outside of the project, and at other times it's managed within the project, typically reporting to the project manager of the overall project. What do you need? Well, you must have clearly defined scopes of work. These need to be identified and outlined within the owner's project interface management plan. In my observation, I've seen multiple owners insist on the creation of this interface management plan. And the interface management plan also talks about the requirement of engaging EPCs that work on the project as well, sometimes really as early as the RFP or RFQ that goes out. You also need to have clearly identified interface points. This is often overlooked, and interface points tend to be talked about in more generalities. But what is very important is to identify those interface points, number them or designate them in whatever appropriate schema your project is using. And when you number them or name them, all parties can then refer to that interface point consistently, okay? That you don't have people saying, using phrases of approximately where this pipe hits the, this particular a point in the project. You have the ability to get much more specific. You also need to have clearly defined responsibilities. Ideally, a project, one of these major capital projects, is going to have a specific person, and that's by name and title, who is responsible for ensuring overall delivery of interface management. And then I mentioned that the owner's chosen EPC should be required to comply with those procedures by building this into the RFP, RFQ, and then eventually the EPC award contracts. And you definitely need clear responsibilities for routing and monitoring those interface agreements. Well, what else do you need? Compliance. When you're looking at putting together an interface management plan or choosing a system, does the owner procedure help ensure consistent application of engineering specifications or compliance with regulations? That's an important point. Reporting. One reason why you want to do this is the ability to generate reports and see where you are in real time. And I can tell you from personal experience how handy it is to be able to quickly generate one of those reports in real time with the click of a button, rather than have to chase down multiple people, email, request an update on this, or pull something out of an Excel file. You don't want to have to do that. You'll save yourself a great deal of time and reduce errors, improve your schedule as well by having all this data in one place. So these reports I've used in the past is an ability for party A and party B to sit down face-to-face on a regular basis, maybe that's weekly, maybe it's biweekly, to work through those upcoming interface agreements. And you want to make sure that they're ensuring these are on schedule. Like, you can do a 2-week look ahead and say, are we on track for these? Any that are late, find out what the status is or why those are late, and close them out as you move through the interface register. Another thing that's very, very handy to have is a dashboard. Management tends to think more in terms of, they like to see bar charts and they like to see dashboards. Those are very handy for them to look at the project from a big picture level. Your system needs to have or should have the ability to generate these dashboards also on the fly, and also the ability to kind of drill down into those dashboards if someone needs to see things in greater detail. Now, this dashboard will also help you identify and sort all of your data. You should have the ability to drill down into a particular project interface point and see all interface agreements that are tied to that. And ultimately, really just be able to see the status of every interface, open, late, closed, etc. So risk mitigation, why do all this? Well, we've talked about cost, we've talked about schedule improvement, but really risks can be mitigated through proper use of the system as well. So let's talk about that for a second. One thing that a proper interface management procedure and system can deliver to you is a full, complete audit trail of every event associated with an interface point and with an interface agreement. Who modified it? When? What did they change? Did they update, this particular field? Who made those edits? And that allows you to see, for instance, where is an interface agreement stuck, if you will. Sometimes that becomes very important. Another really cool thing would be integration of schedule. And a system that is able to do that is really kind of leaps and bounds ahead of those that do not have that capability. So delay, or at the bottom there, sticky interface agreements, I call them. Sometimes you just have an event where party A and party C, whatever, can't agree, and neither one really wants to kind of yield to their particular position, and these things can kind of linger. So what's important is that the interface manager escalate these to the overall project manager or the overall project engineering manager, so that really you can organize a focused meeting, gathering, get the relevant parties around the table, and work those items to closure. And if it's not around the table, it's around a conference call these days. But effectively make sure that that all parties are in agreement with what gets decided. Okay, another important thing is some of the things that you need to have your interface manager do. Now, occasionally, the interface manager really needs to be enough or aware enough of all other assurance procedures for the project so that they can understand if closure of an interface agreement may require kicking off a management of change, or may require assignment of new actions, or it may result in the creation of a new project risk. So you need to find an interface manager who understands the big picture enough to appreciate the need for these other workflows as well. And so on the subject of workflows, you get bonus points if you have a system that is able to fully integrate with your document management system, with scheduling, with management of change, with contract management, with risk management, etc. So ideally, an interface agreement should have the ability to, at the simplest level, include a document number within the interface agreement, but even better would be the ability to hyperlink or hotlink over to that document as well. So in a quick summary, having witnessed this interface management at Shell, BP, Chevron, and Kelly at some other majors as well, we're seeing a trend towards greater focus on interface management and the importance of it. We recognize also that projects, the appropriate amount of interface management that gets done for a project may be, related to this overall size of the project, right? So a $100 million project could require much more much less detail than maybe a 10 or 40 billion dollar project, clearly. I am seeing some of these majors require their EPCs to have an interface management procedure, require that that procedure gets reviewed, if you will, by the overall project manager to make sure that it's in compliance with the owner's goals. And then also that interface management, that the project interface manager has a really overall big picture view of everything that's going on in the project. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kelly. And
okay, well, thank you very much, Alan. I think we both agree and have seen it firsthand that the discipline of interface management can help projects mitigate risk and help them to better manage the cost and schedules related to their projects that you were mentioning earlier. And really, I know that owners in today's market and today's world are really looking for every possible opportunity to meet the objectives of managing cost and schedule, and by providing the tools to their project teams to help them be successful. That's always a great first step. So I'm going to jump into our product demo now. So I'm just going to pop over to our Coreworx login screen and log into the system. So this is a very robust security model that's built into our solution. That allows you to, manage everything from document to control, project interfaces, change management, and as I mentioned earlier, in an integrated fashion on an integrated single platform. Because as we all know, these processes are integrated. An interface could result in a change request being raised. A change order could result in some additional interfaces or a change in the interface scope breakdown. So they're all very much related, very much tied together. So when Ian logs on to the Coreworx site, as you can see here, I have a very in-depth project tree here that covers all of the project controls and project management type tools. And then over here on the right-hand side of the page, and I'm just going to slide this over a little bit to give us a bit more room, we have our interface management solution. So depending on the user who is logging into the system, our security model will control what they have access to and visibility to, and what features of the system that they're able to participate in. So the first thing I want to focus on really is scope management and scope definition. And Alan talked about how it's very important to ensure that you've got a good scope breakdown and a good understanding of roles and responsibilities at each interface. And that's really what it's all about. Interface management is about ensuring that you understand and have identified and defined that scope split across your contact boundaries. So one of the first things I'm going to take you to is to take a look at our dashboard report. So this is basically a graphical view of your interface register. So this is taking and replacing those Excel spreadsheets or those multiple Excel spreadsheets that you may have, and really combining it into a single central source. It is obviously a web-based application, so if you have project teams around the globe, they will have no difficulties in logging into the system and participating in interface management for your project. So as you can see here, I have a number of graphical dashboards available to me. As a project manager, I want to monitor, as Alan mentioned, scope and what's coming due in the next 30, 60, 90 days related to my project interfaces. And if we take a look first at the one on the left-hand side here, this is our interface point summary. This is the report that's going to identify that scope breakdown. So by your scopes of work or your scope packages, this is going to identify the number of interfaces that team is responsible for managing and what the current status is of those interfaces. And of course, we want to see eventually where we all get to the blue status here, which is closed, right? You want to be able to monitor progress, monitor scope or potential scope increase, and you can do so by using the interface point summary dashboard that you see here. The other one I'm just going to touch on a little bit briefly here is the interface agreement early warning. So the one you see on the right-hand side of the page. Now this is a little bit different. This is showing you the interface agreements that have been raised in the system and that are being currently monitored and tracked by the project team. So we have our interface points, which identify those interfaces, and then we have the agreements, which are used by your project teams. And it's the tool that's used to exchange information and deliverables related to the project interfaces that you've identified and defined for your project. As you can see here, again, we're looking at this by scopes of work or by contractor participating or interfacing party on your project. And again, the graph will show me the total number of interface agreements that are currently in the system, and it breaks it down by status. What you want to focus on as an interface manager or project manager is those that are coming due in the next kind of configured time frame. Here we have 60 days before you get into the situation where you have a number of interfaces that are overdue. The capabilities of these dashboards are very unique in that you have the ability to drill down. So for example, here we have quite a few interfaces that are overdue for our CUC, our utilities package here. So I'm going to drill down on that, and what the dashboard allows me to do is then view those agreements by discipline. And this is really great too, because if you're the electrical engineer looking at this, you may only want to focus on electrical. The piping guy may want to focus on piping. So I'm gonna pick on piping here. We have a few interface agreements that are overdue for my piping discipline. I'm going to drill down again, and then the final drill down actually takes me to a detailed report which shows me a listing of all those interface agreements that are overdue and gives me a much more detailed overview of those particular agreements. In Coreworx, anywhere where you see a document number, those are clickable links, so you can actually click on the number and open the form. So as you can see here, I've gone from a very high-level view of my interface register right down to a specific interface agreement. And this is very powerful. If I need to follow up with somebody, or I need to, maybe I take this report to a meeting, or maybe I'm facilitating an online meeting, I have the ability to quickly zero in on the interfaces that have a potential, may have a potential impact on our project delivery. So I want to keep my eye on those, and I want to be able to manage those. All right. So the other thing I'm going to show you, I'm just going to minimize this dashboard here for a minute. The other feature that I want to show you of Coreworx, of course, is the online register. Very important that you provide your teams with the ability to locate documents quickly. Nobody wants to be spending, even minutes, let alone hours, looking for a document. So it's very important that you provide the tools where they can, quickly search for and locate the documents that they need. So this is our search page. This is our ability to query that online interface register. As you can see, there's a number of criteria here that a user can use to filter their search results. So I could select a scope of work, so I'll pick my SRU and utilities package. I could filter it by discipline if I chose to. All right, and the values that you see here in all of the pick lists that are configured for Coreworx are configurable on a project-by-project basis. So it is very common for an owner to have a sort of a predefined set of disciplines that they use, consistently throughout their projects, and we can certainly support that in the configuration and setup of the project. And this is very important because it really leads to a compliance issue. When you're capturing the data in the system, you ensure that you're capturing the same data for every interface agreement, and it's consistent. So the input is consistent because you're guiding your users by providing pick list values that kind of populate those fields for them. As opposed to a spreadsheet where somebody's entering in maybe piping, somebody's doing PI, and you get kind of a random mix of values that you're capturing across those various spreadsheets. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm actually just going to use, we have a keyword search as well, which if you know a word or a phrase, you can enter that in the keyword search, or maybe it's the document number. Document numbers are always very important. I'm just going to set this package list back to all, and I'm going to search for all the interfaces in my system that reference the word power. So I'm going to get a results list here that are returned that give me a set of electrical interfaces that I'm managing. Now it's also, I touched a little bit on the security model, but I'm logged into the system right now as the interface manager for the project. So I'm part of the owner's project interface team, and therefore, as playing that role, I have the ability to view all of the documents within the system. But our security model will ensure when other parties, other interfacing parties log in, they're only going to have access and visibility to the documents that they're a party to. All right, so our security model is going to control right down to a document level what users have access to and visibility to within the system. All right, so I'm going to just show you, and we're going to take a look at one of these interface points in the system. I'll pick this one here. It's a power and control cable. Again, this is the interface point document or form that we're looking at, and this is the tool that the project teams will use to identify that scope split, right? Identify those boundaries between the scopes of work where your EPCs and your interfacing parties need to communicate and collaborate. Certainly during engineering, they need to do that to get a consistent design. And then into construction, Alan made the reference to scaffolding, right? When is that coming? Who's doing that? Who's responsible for that? When is it being taken down? So those are all very important interfaces during different phases of your project. So the interface point form is used to identify those interfaces, identify the parties who are responsible for those interfaces, and then also to give them some additional guidance and direction and who's responsible for what at that interface. Because without this, without a sort of a structured interface management discipline in place, that's where you run into trouble. Oh, I thought he was providing the nuts and bolts, or I thought he was setting up the scaffold, and you get into that situation where there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of uncertainty, and people don't know who's responsible for what task at a given interface. So just to go through some of the key points of this form, we assign a doc number. That's very common in any kind of project practice. You have document numbers. We certainly do revision control because that's important as well. You want to be able to track your interfaces by revision and go back to those historical revisions if necessary. We have our attributes that we're tracking our interfaces against. Here we're using phase, discipline, area, and system. They're very common attributes to track and manage project interfaces. But what's important here is if we look at the lead and interface. Some of you may be more familiar with this just as contractor A and contractor B. We differentiate. We have what we call a lead party and an interface party, and then we define the scope for each of those parties. So as you can see here, we reference the package and we reference the contractor who's responsible for managing that scope of work, who has been awarded that contract. And that's where we can integrate with our contract management system, and that interfaces are often defined very early in the project, during the feed stage. At that point, you're still defining your scope, doing your breakdown, and certainly the contractors are not on board. So the tool can be used in the very early stages of the project to help the feed contractor and the owner identify scope and identify interfaces, and then it's very wise, for lack of a better term, to include those interfaces in your invitation to bid packages, just to give greater clarity and instruction to the contractors that are bidding on that scope. All right, so we identify the parties that are involved. We identify additional scope if it's required. And we also have the ability to also link or connect. Again, that goes back to that integration. You have the ability, if you choose to do so, is to link your interface points to documents that maybe you're managing in your document management system, or they're just reference documents that are going to provide, again, additional clarity and direction to the contractors managing those interfaces. So as you can see here, this is just a sample document. It kind of gives a detailed description of who's responsible for what, often includes a diagram of the particular type of interface that we're discussing here. And if I just scroll down to the next page, it even goes so far as to get into each of the phases of the project and identifying as the lead or interface or contractor A or contractor B who's responsible for what throughout each of the phases of the project. So some very, very, very powerful tools and capabilities that are available to you and available at your fingertips. Okay. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit on this form. We won't have time today to cover everything on this form, but I did want to point out a few key features. The audit trail. All right, so here we have a history or an audit trail. I know Alan mentioned, having that audit trail is very important. Being able to understand, who said what when, what actions we're taking, that type of thing. So we have a complete audit trail on this interface point that documents and tracks when certain events and updates occurred for this particular interface. Scrolling down a little bit further, the other area I wanted to kind of focus on today was, well, where are the interface agreements for this interface point? Well, they're right here. So we have a table or a grid that shows you for this interface that we're looking at right now, here are all the current interface agreements that have been raised in the system. The grid gives you, of course, the doc number, and again, that's a clickable link. You can click on that to view and open and view that interface agreement. If you are using it by phase, and again, this is an optional component, but one that we highly recommend. You can manage your interfaces by phase, and you have the ability to transition from one phase to another. Phase is identified on the grid as well. The title, the need date, when are these documents due, when are these deliverables, or when is information due, and what the current status is. So you can see, just by looking at one single form, you kind of have a complete history and a complete view of all the activity and actions that have occurred on this particular interface. So some very powerful stuff to help you manage scope, help you manage the EPCs that are delivering your project, and help you understand how you're progressing and ensure that things are being closed out and completed on time. All right, the other topic I wanted to touch on briefly is the work process, the workflow. So Coreworx is a workflow-driven application. When a user comes into the system and raises a new interface agreement, we will handle the routing of that agreement for reviews and approvals, and we also do a lot of automated notifications to keep people informed. These may be people that are directly involved in that interface, or maybe they're just other interested parties that need to be kept informed when a new interface is raised in the system. So we do that through our workflow engine. And if I click on the home page here in our interface management solution, I'm actually taken to my inbox. So this is my Coreworx inbox. We call it My Work Items. So these are work items that I need to handle or respond to. As you can see in my inbox here, I have a number of items I need to respond to. And we also have a number of notifications. So you can see here I have an acceptance overdue notification. So that's something that I probably want to follow up on and find out why that item is overdue within the system. But quite unique to the Coreworx system is this ability to include the owner or the owner's representative, be that a project management team, in the interface agreement process. So contractor A raises an interface agreement. It can be submitted directly to contractor B. Or if the project chooses, the owner endorser or the owner or the owner's representative can be included in that process, and we call it endorsing the request. So when an interface agreement is raised in the system, it will go to the interface manager for the project team, and he has the ability to review that request before it's submitted to the other party. Now this is very great in the ability to help you manage scope, manage requests. You have the ability before this request is sent to the other party to review it. You want to look at the dates, right? Are the dates that the information is being requested, is that a reasonable date? you compare that to your schedule. Is it aligned, right? Is that date okay? Is the request complete? Is it accurate? Are the details clear? Is the requesting party asking the information of the correct responding party? Because you don't want to unnecessarily have other parties responding to agreements or having to deal with agreements that really shouldn't be intended for them or shouldn't be sent to them. All right, so this gives the owner or the project team the ability to kind of vet that interface agreement, review it, ensure it's accurate before submitting it on to the other party. Now, much like the interface point form that we looked at earlier, interface agreements are assigned a doc number. We do revision control as well. And if I scroll down here on the form, it looks very similar. We track an audit trail. So for an interface agreement, we're going to know who did what when. And we track comments to date. Of course, very, very important is to ensure that if you are, touching a document or making an update or a change, you want to put comments in there. And this is also all very powerful for if you have a high volume of user turnover. I mean, it happens. People will come and go on your project. And being able to log into a system like this that has a record of everything and an audit trail and all the comments that were made is going to get your users up to speed quite quickly. If your interface manager goes and a new person steps in to take on that role, this information is all there and available to him. It's not hidden and buried in somebody's email account. So that's the ability to endorse a request. This is part of our workflow engine. If you're just looking at the bottom of the form here, when you receive a request, the user has the ability to take an action. Right? So I could send it back to the party by doing a clarify request, or I could endorse it, which would just progress the interface agreement to the next step in the workflow. All right. Alan also touched on integration, right? And certainly Coreworx provides an integrated platform. So there's 2 points of integration that I would just like to show you today. One is the integration with the document management system. Again, this is a very powerful feature in that often the topics of an interface agreement are the request for a drawing or a PNID or different documents that are shared between the various EPCs on a project. And if those are controlled documents, you want them going through the formal document control channels. You don't want sort of rogue copies of these documents out there in the world. And you also want to make sure that as new revisions of those documents are submitted, the parties that were on that initial distribution list, they're informed that a new revision was submitted to the project, because that may have an impact or an effect on their design, if you're in the design phase of a project. So this is kind of a blank interface agreement form that I would have the ability to fill out. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually just going to scroll down to the bottom here to show you how we have the ability to create a link into documents that are being managed in our document management system. So as you can see here in the reference documents, we have our desktop files, which are basically file attachments, and that's great for doing a lot of clarity and additional information, but providing additional information to the other party. And this is typically used, though, more so for the uncontrolled documents that you might be exchanging as two EPCs participating on a project. But the DMS document links, if you are granted access, you have the ability to create a link to a document. So if I just go ahead and click on that, excuse me, link to document, a page appears that actually is showing me a list of the documents that I've recently accessed. So that's very useful. If the document exists in my list, I can simply click on that. Or I also have the ability to do a doc search, right? So if I know the document number, or maybe I know a term or a phrase and I can use a wildcard, I could search for documents and get a document list returned. I'm just going to go ahead and make a connection to this civil site plan that we have here. I'm going to select that, click on Create My Link or Add It to the Form. The system is just telling me, okay, it's performing your action, so hold on. The document link has been created and the document was successfully linked to my form. So this is just some good feedback to the end user to make sure that they understand that their action is being acted upon. And then what we have here, if I scroll back down, now I have a link to the document in our document management system. And the beauty of this is for this interface agreement, the parties to this agreement will be forever kept informed when new revisions of this document are submitted to the project. So what you saw here was a manual connection to a document within the document management system, but we can also support the same type of linkage or connection through our transmittal process. All right. The final thing I'm going to cover today is I'm going to take a look at two reports I want to show you. Our schedule integration report and our ability to integrate with our project schedule. So I'm going to click on our work schedule discrepancy report. Now this feature is typically restricted to the interface management team, although it can be extended to the EPCs that are participating on the project as well. So we can integrate, you can tie or link an interface point or interface agreement to multiple work schedules. I'm going to go ahead and just pick my March 2017 updates and execute my report. And what this gives you the ability, so as the interface manager, you can work with your planner to integrate your high-risk interfaces into the schedule. They could be tied to existing milestones. You could generate interface milestones, tie them to certain activities. It really will depend on the interface that you're linking to your schedule. But once that connection is done, you will take periodic exports, be that monthly or quarterly, from the schedule, import that information into Coreworx, and then you have the ability to generate this report. And what this report shows you is the first few columns of information are actually coming from the schedule. We have our WBS code, our activity ID, activity name. But then we show you the interface point and interface agreements that schedule activity has been connected to. And what that gives you the ability to do is to take a look at the schedule date, the planned completion of that particular activity, and compare it to the need date for the interface agreement. And certainly what you're looking for are those situations where the need date of the interface agreement extends beyond the planned completion date of that activity or milestone within your schedule, because now you've got a potential issue. And as you can see here, we highlight those potential issues in red. So you've got a discrepancy between the schedule and the interface agreement that the interface agreements are kind of the day-to-day activity that your contractors are making commitments against. And so you want to continually make sure that those commitments remained aligned to your project work schedule. Okay. And then the final report, and I'll hand it back over to Teresina. I do want to leave some time for questions, is I just want to quickly run the interface trends report. Now this report is going to give you a total overview of your interface management program and how it's progressing on your project. So this is a report as the interface manager. This is the report. You execute this report, you include it into your management reporting that you're required to do on a monthly basis, and it's going to give your project manager and project director the information they need to understand how the project is progressing as it relates to project interfaces. And what you can see here, this project's been running for some time. We started off in 2013 and we're out to 2017. You can filter it, so you can select the reporting period for this report. I just let it go for the entire duration of the project. But what you can see here is the interface agreements that we're planning to complete on a month-by-month basis, comparing it to the blue lines, which is the actual progress. And of course, what you want to make sure is the gap between your planned and your actual does not get too great, because that's going to indicate a potential issue. You're not closing out the interface agreements as per the commitments that are being made. And if I scroll down a little bit, we also have another table or grid here that reports on the interface agreements, again by scope package, by scope of work. And it indicates to the user reviewing this report the total number of agreements that are in the system, what's open, what's overdue, what's new this month, what was closed this month on a package by package basis. And then we use the red, yellow, green indicators to indicate if there's any, any potential issue with any of these scopes of work with regards to, completing and closing out the interface agreements that they have in the system. And as you can see here, if I was an interface manager,
Thanks, Kelly. We've just got a couple minutes here, and I'll let people ask. We've got a couple questions up here. I'll give people another minute or so to type anything in. In the meantime, I'll just mention that we do have a couple of events coming up. Our two big events this year actually are coming up fairly soon. The first one is our annual Project Excellence event happening in Houston on June 1st. More details to come on that. Also, we'll be sponsoring the Downstream Engineering and Construction Conference this year in New Orleans on June 15th. So also some emails to follow on that for those of you located in the Gulf area. So I'll ask a couple questions here, Kelly and Alan. Do you have a good example of an interface agreement internal to one organization between two disciplines? Are they registered?
Okay, thank you. Very good question. Then let's take the example, for instance, of maybe in the early stages of planning a project. There's a flow assurance department and there's a piping department, and so they're going to be putting together some initial concepts of what that piping might look like. The flow assurance person is going to need to know specifications of the pipe. They're going to need to know also what kind of fluid, at what pressure, what temperature, and things like that in order to perform their calculations. So that could be an internal example, just one. And they wouldn't necessarily really be handled differently. It's just a matter of, as you kick off this interface, the person initiating the interface would be an internal, let's say an internal party of an owner, and then they would effectively tag another internal party within the same owner, the department that has the information that they need to do their work. Now, when you can take that a step further to say, okay, now let's talk about an EPC, and maybe you have one EPC with topsides, and maybe you have one EPC with a hull, and in that case, you would be pushing it down kind of like one layer deeper, if you will. So you could have someone from EPC 1 asking a question of EPC 2 and potentially then flowing that question up through the owner. But as Kelly mentioned, you don't have to flow information up through an owner for review and validation. And we have seen owners who've kind of taken just taken a step back and just kind of said, all right, EPC 1 and 2, we trust you guys. We've worked together with you before, and we are going to be watching in the background and seeing how these interface requests are going. And then we've seen the other extreme where an interface request issued by EPC 1 doesn't even make it over to EPC 2 unless it's approved for forwarding by the owner. But let's see, your specific question was back to interface agreements within an organization. Here's another example. Let's talk about wells. In wells, the geology team needs data to understand the structure of what they're looking for. The drilling team needs to know, hey, where are you going to target this well in order to put together their drilling program. The petrophysics people need to understand all of the layers of the structure that they're going to be drilling through and what to look for to know that they've tagged a certain strata when they're drilling. Lots of examples. This can be used for in many cases. Taking it a step further on that example, the regulatory department, when they're getting approved for the well, they need to have the drilling plan. So it's all tied together, And yes, indeed, you can have internal to an organization, and you can also have external to an organization as well.
Thanks, Alan. So we're just out of time now. Actually, we've gone over by a couple minutes. So there have been a couple other questions that have come in, but what we'll do is we'll include the questions and the answers to those questions in our follow-up email. This email will also include a link to the recorded presentation as well as the slides. So with that, I'd like to thank you again, Alan and Kelly, for sharing your knowledge with us today. This does wrap up our webinar as well as our three-part series all 3 recordings will be available on our website. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at info@coreworx.com, and we would be happy to get back to you. Thanks, guys.